But let's get back. You talked about everybody needs a therapist.
Yes.
So just walk me through your like what was your biggest lesson from therapy, and has therapy always been like accessible to you?
Really good questions. One, I'm not in therapy. I need to be. And I say that as a person who's currently suffering from like bad mental health days. To a certain extent, it's not been diagnosed, mind you. I haven't been to a therapist, but I do think I have some sort of anxiety or depression. It could have been because of the pandemic. I don't know. All I know is in larger group settings, which this has never occurred before, I get clammy, I get jittery, I get fidgety, but anyway, I do suffer from depression, uh, seasonal depression, or like random bouts of it. I just know because of the way I was brought up, it wasn't ever a thing for consideration. Um, One lesson that I think I can learn from it is to like accept certain flaws, because a lot of that is what leads into my depression. I'm an overthinker, and it's like if I see a flaw in an aspect of my life, I'm gonna hyper focus on it, and instead of enjoying all the rainbows that the other aspects of my life are providing, I'm looking at this one thunderstorm, and I get buried in it. I know that's not something I can process on my own.
Mm-hmm.
So therapy is something that I feel can help that.
Yeah.
Accessibility, especially now, today's day and age, you can reach out to a therapist via an app somewhere, but I feel like to a certain extent the market is flooded with these teletherapy apps that doesn't provide quality mental health services.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, the sit down on the Chase couch and tell me how you feel kind of stuff costs a lot.
Yeah.
And a lot, that accessibility question is then turned into, well, is it appropriately priced?
Mm-hmm.
And, that's a whole new can of worms. But I think one thing that's not really talked about is, especially being a minority, being raised in America, first generation, how are
Is that distracting?
It's not.
Okay.
No, but how are our first generation minority Americans dealing with their cultural
Stigmatization.
divides of
yeah.
mental health? Because being from relating to my muddiness,
Yeah.
being from a family with diametrically opposing cultures, like again, my father's Pakistani, so conservative Muslim. My mother was Filipino, or is Filipino, and she was raised Roman Catholic, so
Man.
it's they're in the same spectrum of like Abrahamic religions, but one's a little bit more liberal than another, if you get what I'm saying. And I know growing up in a household like that, even if they did come from different backgrounds, both of them stressed the unimportance of mental health. It's oh well, you should be mentally resilient. You should be able to handle this. I'm also the oldest child, so that's I'm parent number 3.
Older child burden syndrome, like
Yes, and it's real. And I think, because there's a lot of topics on mental health that gets talked about and gets the spotlight. I just want to throw this out there into the gauntlet because I don't feel like it's talked about enough.
Okay.
How, first generation minority Americans who have to, in a way, assimilate their upbringing with their own identity as an American. How are y'all mental health doing? Are you okay? Because, as crazy as it sounds, I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who have a foreign friend, first generation, and they're an overachiever. They're a hyperachiever. And for some reason, they sometimes can't handle it. And they either get the imposter syndrome or the pressure does get to them and they have, unhealthy tendencies. Me. But everybody knows of that. Everybody knows of they're carrying the weight of the world of their family on their shoulders, so they have to achieve. Are we as a society asking, are they okay enough? Because it's like, oh yeah.
Probably not.
No, probably not, right?
Probably not.
So, yeah, that was my little thing.
Yeah, that was that's something that I don't really think about when we talk about like mental health or therapy. So, and the only way I thought about it before is when you see, especially in forms of media, when like a mother and a father are getting divorced and they go to therapy as a family to try to rebuild that family. And I thought, what if like first generation like families, like instead of going to therapy because mom and dad are getting a divorce, what if they just like go to therapy to really talk about, like, is that first child okay? Especially now at this age, right? So if you're like our age and you go like, hey mom, hey dad, can you come? Can we just talk to this therapist real quick and just try to like
address baby traumas?
Yeah. Especially because it's the traumas. Like, I like to think it's from being the first. Cause I'm the first one too. A lot of those traumas aren't intentional or aren't on purpose. It's just like the lack of knowledge, and they were
mixed with high expectations.
Yeah, and they were just working with what they knew at the time and what they thought was the only thing. But now that everybody's a little bit more open or a little bit more willing to be open, I think it would just be so much easier if you were able to. Because I know some parents are stubborn as a motherfucker and they think they're okay. They don't want to do anything. But I think it would just be maybe prioritize that family therapy too as well. Yeah. Just like you said, it's something to think about, really. Like what you said, that had no real focus on it. I was like, holy shit, definitely not.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very niche topic, but as niche as it is, it affects a lot of people because we live in a country where we're called the mixing pot. Like, unless you structure your friend group that way, which, hey, that's it's a cup of tea. If you only have a certain kind of people, that's on you. But no, like everybody knows. Culturally speaking, we all come from different places. So the things that affect us mentally, like a person of color versus a non-person of color, cultural things will affect their mental health differently. You can kind of pick that apart even more, and it's like, well...
You could pick apart everything
Well, within certain minorities. Yeah. Like, how can certain things affect, like, Southeast Asianers versus Africans? Mm-hmm. Because... Like, I think that also will provide a better context for mental health as a whole. It'll kind of, I guess, flesh it out in a way.
Yeah.